Very nice man.
Very, very intelligent, very, very educational. And of course, I was trained to be a teacher, so Dorothy and I had a little bit of that in common. But yeah.
Okay, well, long as you enjoyed yourself. Oh no, this gentleman.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening.
Oh, evening, Rabbi.
Welcome to Belmont. We are back for another fantastic evening. 2 evenings in a row. Last night we had phenomenal speaker.
Yes, it was.
Only to be matched tonight by, I want to say, our very own Tzvi Sperber, because I feel like he's ours. We've done several events with him. We've done a Poland trip with him. And as we've said in the past, that his father was very instrumental in the early days of Belmont, being a Kenton family. So in just a moment, we're going to have Tzvi join us live from Israel, and we are very excited. We've done a tour of Hebron, we've done a tour of Tzfat, we did the Hanukkah story, and tonight we're getting a tour of the Gush, both in history and I imagine we're getting a bit political as well, because it can't not. If everyone could just mute yourselves, that would be wonderful. It's me having to do. And even if you think you don't need to, you do need to. Trust me. It's always better to
Mute yourself.
so everyone, if you could just mute. We don't want to we don't want to disturb or interrupt. Still waiting for a few people to mute. Lee, welcome.
Hello, Rabbi. How are you? Can you hear me well enough?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. It's wonderful to see you. We missed you.
Well, we're waiting for you to come back to Israel.
We're waiting for us.
Yeah, thank God things are on the move here, as you know. Even with the terrible tragedy we had last week, still the whole of Am Yisrael had last week, of course.
Yeah, we've spoken quite a bit about it.
Sure.
Just to say that this is not the first attempt we've done this talk. I think this is about the third or fourth attempt we've tried to do this evening, this particular talk this evening with Tzvi, touring the Gush. I think this is the fourth attempt, and the other 3 attempts were sort of quashed by Israel going on lockdown. But a huge thank you for Tzvi for giving up your time doing this. A huge thank you to the Swans for their extreme dedication to allow this to happen. Anyone that's interested in future tours, events, please do get in touch for sponsorship. We'd love to be able to continue this type of programming. But Tzvi, we're going to hear all about your talk this evening. It would be great just to, as we've got you, what's the we've spoken a lot about Moron, and feel free to bring that in if that's something you want to talk about. But just Bichlal in general, just for 2 minutes, just what's the atmosphere in Israel like, sort of post-ish COVID? How's everyone feeling? Is life back to like what have we got in store for us? Please God, as we get towards the summer, is life going back to normal somewhat?
So hi, good evening to everybody. Wonderful to see everybody again. My auntie in Swansea, she's here, as I saw as well, which is fantastic. So what's going on now in Israel? Well, without a doubt, we're sort of out of COVID. We've got less than 100 cases of people that have got COVID, which is incredible. I'm not saying that nobody's dying. We still have some people who are unfortunately in hospital that haven't managed to recover, but we're doing very well from that perspective. Israel, of course, is being extremely cautious with who they're allowing in and who they're not allowing in, and therefore even a country that originally was green, which was Cyprus, where they allowed Israeli tourists to go to Cyprus and then come back, is now on the red list. Okay, Sinai, which was a place that Israelis were traveling to, is now on the red list. And so things change very, very quickly. And that causes major problems for people who are, of course, traveling. I would say, though, we are all hoping that after May 23rd in Israel, tourists will be allowed into Israel. You will have to go through the regular tests that that even an Israeli who comes back from a certain country will have to go through. And then hopefully there'll be no isolation for people coming from England. But we're waiting to hear officially what the story is. Up until now, it's been very hard to get people in here. But now, hopefully from May 23rd onwards, it's going to be a little less. Summer tours are coming in from certain countries. I know that the UJA cancelled theirs, unfortunately, but America is still bringing in their summer tours to these places. Massa, which is the groups, of course, of people that come for half a year, 3 months, half a year. They're coming in, and the beauty is they get vaccinated while they're here. And on May 31st, we're taking our first groups to Poland.
Oh, wow.
As well. We have, I think in May, end of May, June, we've got about 400 people going to Poland. All yeshiva students and seminary girl students who want to finish the year with their trip to Poland because they missed out. So that's happening. Okay, Poland are opening up from May 29th. Again, they're not completely safe there, but they're opening up, and we're going to take every precaution that we need to do. Just on the other point, on the mood in Israel, Meron gave a massive shake-up to people in Israel. There's no doubt about it. But thank God, it also brought some beauty. Okay, the unity, I'm sure that Sivan spoke about last night. Okay, the unity has been exceptional. We have 7 families, unfortunately, from my neighborhood who lost somebody. So it's been a great tragedy in the neighborhood itself. But the unity that's been felt by Jews who are less religious and Jews who are more religious, or you would consider ultra-Orthodox and secular, whatever it may be, has been felt, thankfully, until, of course, the politicians get their teeth into things. And that's exactly what's happening now. And with that limbo place that we're all in at the moment, we haven't got a government again after the 4th elections. It's now been moved over to Yair Lapid. Is he going to be able to make it? Nobody really knows. Could we go into a 5th election? Nobody really knows. And so all of that is going to push away, unfortunately, that good feeling that Meron has given after the terrible tragedy. That won't be here, okay, from a couple of weeks later. We have a very bad memory. Remember, the Jewish people in general have a very bad memory, and that's connected also to the parasha that we're going to be reading this week, Im B'chukotai, okay, which is the double parasha, Bahar and B'chukotai. But Im B'chukotai, the if is the major word here. If you do this, if you do that, if you, okay, but we forget, the Jewish people forget. And unfortunately, we paid prices in the past, and who knows what will happen in the future. But God willing, we'll have a good future ahead of us all.
Please God, Tzvi. So I'm going to hand back. Well, you already sort of handed over to you, but I'm going to let you go. If anyone has questions, feel free during to put it in the chat, or save it for the end, and you can ask me in person. But we'll do the questions unless something is totally understandable, non-understandable. What you know what I'm trying to say. Okay. So I'm handing over, and everyone sit back, strap in, and relax.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. We're going to be touring the area of Gush Etzion this evening. Now, where is Gush Etzion? So if you're in Jerusalem and you're looking south, okay, north would be the Golan, south would be towards Hebron, which we've been to already. In between Hebron and Jerusalem is a place called Bethlehem. Bethlehem. Okay, whenever I ask people what's Bethlehem famous for, everybody says, of course, the Christian connection. We have to remember that David HaMelech, King David, was born there. That's why it's famous to the Jewish people. And the story of Ruth that we're about to read in 2 weeks' time, Ruth from Shavuot, all takes place there. From the perspective of even the fields where we believe that Boaz owned, and he would harvest and leave the part for the poor, the whole story of the Megillah of Ruth takes place there. And we know roughly where those fields are today. Bethlehem has another area around it, beyond there, between Bethlehem and Hebron, which is called Gush Etzion. And Gush Etzion is an area which is over the Green Line, which has been and still is in national consensus in Israel. Now, what do I mean by that? And I'll say this now, and we won't get into the political debate, but I'll say this now just so you understand. There are a couple of places that are under national consensus with regular Israelis. If they come to a decision with the Palestinians of what to do, that will stay within the hands of Israel. One of those areas is Gush Etzion. It may not be all of Gush Etzion, because there's an eastern part of Gush Etzion which overlooks the Dead Sea, and then there's a western part which is more familiar to maybe many of you have traveled that area. The very famous area called Efrat, the area that some of you might know called Beitar. And other places like that, Alon Shvut. Some of you might have sent your kids to yeshiva called Yeshiva Har Etzion, of Rav Lichtenstein and Rav Amital, that was. So all these places that they're under consensus. The other place that's under the consensus is Malei Adumim and Givat Ze'ev. Those are in the north of Jerusalem. And therefore, if you want, protecting Jerusalem from the south and the north. The idea stems all the way back to the story that we're about to tell. Now remember, sitting in Bethlehem is something else. And this is the reason, one of the reasons, why the people will head back to the area of Gush Etzion. In the book of Jeremiah and Yirmiyahu, there's a very famous statement, but we know it from the story in Bereshit, in Genesis. The story is told to us of Rachel, the matriarch, Rachel, who dies on the way. It says, B'derech Ephrata, she dies on the way to Ephrat. Now, we're not exactly sure where the grave is, but for many, many years, we have held the grave to be a place that Moses Montefiore came and rebuilt and built it up, not to what it looks like today, because today it looks like Fort Knox, but what it looked like originally. For those of us who traveled Israel 30 years ago, and remember Kever Rachel, just this building standing on the side of the road, the grave of the matriarch of Rachel. Rachel in the book of Jeremiah, or should I say Jeremiah, has a prophecy speaking about Rachel, and it says, Ko'ama Hashem, thus says the Lord, okay, Nihi B'chid Tamurim, that basically what they're talking about is the idea that Rachel had watched her people go out to Galut, to exile. She will also watch them come back home. And that God tells Rachel, your tears are not in vain. You will see your people returning home. That, with that prophecy, is the reason people went to Gush Etzion. Gush Etzion stems all the way back. And I want to take us now through these videos that we're going to be showing you to the very first parts of the history that we have of Gush Etzion. So I'm just about to share screen, just 1 second. So walking along the road of Gush Etzion today, just outside of the area of Alon Shvat, behind the scenes,
Tzvi, have you optimized this for sound and video sharing? Because it's not coming across very well.
It's not coming across. Hold on. Thank you for telling me. Let's try again. I'm going to share the screen once more. I don't understand why, because I did optimize it. Let's just have a look again.
It still says you're sharing your screen. It didn't stop sharing.
Stop share. All right, let's try again. Okay, I'm gonna share the screen. Let's try one more time. I hope this works. How's this? Tell me if this works.
You know what's better to do? I can see what you're doing. Play the video before you share the screen.
That's what I did before.
And then pause it. And then, okay, that's what I've done before.
That's what I did before.
This might not work as well.
Okay, I hope it does because it's being optimized already.
Okay, good. Okay, bye.
Just hold on a second. I'm sorry about this, everybody.
It's just starting, Suzanne.
Okay, hold on.
Tzvi, you're muted.
Okay, I'm going to try again now.
It's not good. Can't hear you.
Sorry, you can't hear?
It's very faint and out of sync.
That is so weird because it's really sorry. If you just give me 1 minute, I'll just try and sort it out, okay? Let me just try and sort it out, okay? I'm sorry about this.
It's okay. Technology has failed many of us.
It was working very well before. I'm just gonna...
Rabbi, you charge so much entrance fee as well. We expected a good, good presentation here.
Just so everyone knows who's talking, it's Tzvi's mum. Just so everyone can appreciate. Susan, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
You came in and saved Tzvi for a second.
Did I? Are the family all well? I love
We've lost you.
watching you on Havdalah. That's fabulous.
Oh, you're very
I loved
sweet.
it all.
You're very sweet. Thank you. You haven't missed anything either. We've just started.
No, I've been here all the time.
Okay. Of course you have. Of course you would miss it.
No, I have to.
Yeah, you have to.
It's part of my religion.
To follow Tzvi wherever he goes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, so you heard all the nice things I said about him at the beginning.
I did. Thank you. I did.
You remember the early days of Belmont, huh?
Very much so. And all the lovely people from the early days as well.
There's lovely people now as well.
I know.
We're quite fond of them.
You're very lucky to be in that community, and they're very lucky to have you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's all very mutual. I just had a message from Tzvi saying he's on the case. He's just he needs a few seconds just to change the software over. Sometimes I can openly admit that even though I've become a Zoom expert, at the best of times technology fails, and we've all had nightmares with things just not working. So we can allow a little bit of what's the word, rachmanos for getting Tzvi to it'll be worth it. It'll definitely be worth it the next few minutes. He said that it's all going to be sorted. Otherwise, he's going to have to do a lot more talking than he thought he was going to have to do. Out of interest, has anyone on the group, anyone who's watching, has anyone been to the Gush before? Anywhere in the Gush? Yeah, a few people are waving. Okay. I remember once driving in the back streets and I got very lost, so very stressed and worried. Quite understandably, it's not the kind of place you want to get lost, but it's Tzvi mentioned Yeshivat Etzion, which is the yeshiva of the Gush that people call Gush, the Gush yeshiva. I know many boys from the UK have been and studied there. Also, Brovinder's yeshiva in Efrat is a place I visited, especially I was on my year off many times. And that's, I spent the Shabbat of the New Year's Eve of the millennium, so the year 1999 2000, that New Year's Eve I was on my year off with FZY, and all my friends went to Eilat for the weekend because the New Year's Eve was Friday night and I went to yeshiva. You can tell that I didn't have that many friends. No. I had plenty of friends, but I decided not to spend it on the beach. And I went and I was in yeshiva in Efrat and Brovinder's yeshiva with some friends. So we're getting some messages in on the chat, actually, that I'm getting lists of all the boys that have gone through Gush. I do believe the Marks is on, Brian and Jane Marks on. I think they are. I think I saw Brian before. I know Matt's in Kollel there and studying there right now. So we've got plenty of connections with the Gush, and it's a really beautiful place. It's an incredible place to live. Let's see what happens now. We can't hear anything.
Is that any better?
Dealing with what's known as a broken milestone.
Not really.
Okay, do you want to, it's very weird because it worked before when we tested it out.
Try a different video. Try playing the second video just to see if it's
Fine.
Stop screen sharing and
I'll try a different video.
are these on YouTube or not? No.
No, didn't download to YouTube. They're on. I've put them onto VLC now because that should open up the file easier. Okay, let's see if this works. I'm going to share this. Yeah. Are we still sharing? We're not sharing. So let me see.
Not sharing.
Okay, so let me see if I can do this. Don't know why it's doing this. I'm really sorry, everybody. Tell me if this is any better.
No. Is it me or is it everyone else also struggling? Yeah, you're also struggling.
Everyone's struggling.
Yeah.
Is everybody?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tzvi, when you're saying when you click share screen,
Yeah.
What comes up?
Everything that's open on this thing.
And you click on the thing and you've optimized video for share sound and optimized for video clip.
1 second. Where do I do that, Mark?
Okay, so you've got the box open with where you can see everything that's open, right? So you click share screen.
I've done that. I'm gonna try again.
You click the box. You click the file you want to. The file, not in basic, yeah, not in advanced or files.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try this now. Okay, again.
And there's little tick boxes at the bottom corner, right? That you have to optimize for video. Yeah.
Let me try again. Okay, I'm gonna try one other thing here.
Otherwise, you've got a lot of talking to do.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, I just want to get this VLC. All right, here we go. Sorry about this, everybody. Please forgive me.
That's okay.
That's okay. Media. Let's open the file. Let's try this again.
Ooh, what's happened?
Over here, I come across this. This is one of 3 that were found here on this road.
Okay, is that any better?
Yes, that's much better. I don't know what you did.
I'm going to start this again.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
We're walking along a road of Gush Etzion today, which is just outside of the area of Alon Shvut. Behind us, you can see Givat Hachish. Over here, I come across this. This is one of 3 that were found here on this road, because we're now dealing with what's known as a Roman milestone, which means that I'm actually on an old ancient road. And you're going to understand that at the next spot as well. These ancient roads that we're standing on were utilized by not just the Romans, but would have been utilized before them. The Romans never really recreated new highways. What they did do is they extended highways that were here originally that were being used by people, and they then made it comfortable for their soldiers to be able to march upon. Now, of course, remember where Gush Etzion is placed. It's placed between Jerusalem and Hebron. We know they had an encampment in Hebron. We know it is important to them. Hebron, of course, is the place of Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the cave of Machpelah, which was built by Herod under the Roman rule. Yerushalayim, we know, of course, the Romans were there. During the time of the Bet HaMikdash, of course they were there. We know of their encampments around, and we also know of the 10th Legion that came and destroyed it. A Roman mile is around about just under a mile of ours today. It's 1,400 meters of Roman measurement between each one. And as I said, 3 of them were found. Who would have walked on this road beforehand? And this is the incredible thing. Because when we look at this road over here, which today half of it is paved on, but we now know because of the Roman mile that that's not exactly just any old road, but it was here for centuries before that. This is the way that we just spoke about. Who came from Hebron to Yerushalayim? Who went with his son, or his 2 sons, from Hebron to Yerushalayim? stood up outside of Yerushalayim and said, Vayar et hamakom merachok. He saw the place from afar. He saw the Beit HaMikdash, or he didn't see the Beit HaMikdash, but the mountain that it stood upon, Har HaMoriah, from afar. Of course, we're dealing with Avraham Avinu, Abraham, who walked on these paths. It's an incredible thing for us to think about, that as you take the footsteps where you are now in the land of Israel, and remember, we have a positive mitzvah of every 4 footsteps you take in the land of Israel, you fulfill the concept of kibush haaretz, of conquering the land, of being able to make this your own. The whole story behind being in the land of Israel is to feel the dust around your feet, is to understand what it means to feel at home here, to walk that walk of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, of our fathers and mothers, to walk in their footsteps. Remember what we talk about. We speak about the idea of Ma'aseh Avot Siman Labanim. What our fathers teach us should be symbols, should be messages, should be lessons for each and every one of us. When you walk this road, and every time I hike this road, or I ride on this road, or wherever it may be, I feel to myself, what were they telling their kids? What were they passing on? What messages were they giving? And that carries on to our next spot over here, because we know that they weren't the only people that came here. There were thousands others that followed in their footsteps, many generations afterwards. And today, people of Gush Etzion are once again walking on the same road. Let's go to the next place. On these roads, which had thousands of people that would travel throughout the years, we then come across something else, which tells us another story of the Jewish people. Because as we come to this place over here, we see that we enter into a structure that didn't have a covering. It looked exactly like it is now. But you can see there's 2 entrances here. One entrance on this side, and what looks like another entrance, but actually this is the entrance, and this is the exit. As we come down, okay, you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. And you'd already be in a place that would have been covered at that time. I'm going to keep going down. I hope the camera can pick me out, but at least you'll be able to hear. And I'm going to chuck something in the water here. I haven't got something huge, but there's water at the bottom here. The water would have come all the way up to here. And I'm going to come out the other side. Stay there. I'm going to come out the other side. Here we go. And we're going to come up here. And let's explain over here what actually took place. So what we were just in was in a mikveh. The mikveh itself, as you can see, has 2 sides. And the idea here is, of course, people on the road to Yerushalayim went to the mikveh in order to purify themselves before getting to the city. They would go in one side, and then be a wall, which is around about knee height, because the idea was very simple. Remember, pilgrims are coming from all over towards Yerushalayim. I haven't seen my friend for so long, since Pesach, if it's Sukkot now, for instance. Might not have seen him. I may want to greet him, but I've just been into the mikveh. As I'm coming out, I shouldn't greet the person coming in, because of course I've gone into the mikveh to purify myself. And these people haven't done that yet. So you don't want to be able to make sure that you mix up this idea of purity and impurity by saying hello until the person's gone into the mikveh himself. This isn't the only type that we have. Many mikvaot around Jerusalem, ritual baths around Jerusalem, are the same type, where you have this wall period, that's around about knee height. You find it in the area of the southern wall excavations, right outside of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. All of these places that are telling us a story of what's taking place. Now, again, where do we know this from? In Masechet Shkalim, it's talking about the idea that come Adar, the month of Adar, which of course we know Purim sits in, you come and fix up the roads that we just walked upon, and you fix up the mikvaot that are on the way to Jerusalem. You make sure that everything's working in working order and is ready for the thousands and thousands of people that are going to be heading towards Jerusalem for Pesach. What about on the way back after Sukkot? Because remember, on Sukkot we say the famous blessings that we ask HaKadosh Baruch to Mashiv HaRuach Moed HaGashem, to be able to make the winds blow and bring in the rains to help the winter crops. And then we say, V'tein talumata levacha. We speak about this idea that God should give us the right amount of water for our crops. It should be a bracha for us. But if you're living in Chutz La'aretz, you don't say it then. And the reason was as follows. They knew that they could get out of Israel in time. They could go along these roads where we are now, and they'd still be out by the end of Sukkot possibly. And by the way, Sukkot is a very interesting idea. Sukkot, we spent all 7 days in the Beit HaMikdash. At Pesach, it seems very likely that we didn't do that. We spent the first day and the rest of Pesach was spent at home. So people were able to get to their homes within the last 6 days of Pesach. But Sukkot, they're here. The summer's still here at that time. Why do you say V'tein talumata levacha at a different time to that in Israel? Why is it close to 60 days later? It's because it wanted to make sure that all the pilgrims managed to get home to their places before the rains ruined the roads. The roads that would be fixed up again come the month of Adar to be able to bring those pilgrims back on that journey towards Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, the holy city of Jerusalem. Let's carry on with that journey.
Okay, so the road itself, which you saw there, that's from the time period of the ancient time period. What happened afterwards? Because now we're about to jump to 1948. There was Jewish population in the area of Gush Etzion for many, many, many years. We have periods during the time period after the second Beit HaMikdash, called the Byzantine period, where Jews were in a place called Givat HaChish. I know you just spoke about Alon Shvut a second ago, Yeshivat HaEtzion. Just beyond Yeshivat HaEtzion is a place called Givat HaChish. And that's the Byzantine area. We found there ideas of Jewish people that lived there. We have agricultural archaeology, which takes place in the area of Gush Etzion, and we know that this continued. So there were Jews who lived in the areas. Now, of course, come the 16th century, there are no real Jews that are living there. There are some in Hebron, not really in the area of Gush Etzion where we just were. Hebron, of course, will continue all the way until 1929, until the famous riots that take place there, killing over 60 Jews in 1929. Those riots will also hit people that are going to be living in Gush Etzion. But where are the majority of Jews living in the 16th century in Israel? They're living either in Gaza, which is incredible for us to understand that. The Gaza Strip had one of the most beautiful synagogues standing there. When I was in the army 30 years ago, okay, it was still standing. It's been destroyed by the Palestinians today. And of course, Safat and Yerushalayim and Hebron. Those were the main places that Jews were living. But let's now jump forward to what takes place. And when we jump forward now, we're going to deal with the story of where the Jews come to. How they come to this place, they start to settle again the land. They'll be kicked out in 1929. They come back again. They set up the land again, kicked out again in 1936, all because of Arab riots. Finally again in 1947, they finally managed to start to settle the area again. So we're going to jump forward now in our period in order to be able to understand. Excuse me a second, let me just get this up for you. I'm sorry about this.
Gush Etzion that sits behind us, as you can see the hills over there, are sitting in between Hebron and Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Gush Etzion, and then Hebron. And it plays a major part, not just from the time periods of the temple, but also from a time period that we're going to be dealing with in the place that we're standing. Because in 1947, on the 29th of November of 1947, of course, we have the famous UN vote in Lake Success, which gives happiness and joy to so much of Israel. The fact that we ourselves are going to have a Jewish state alongside an Arab state. But within that, certain places that we have settled are going to stay outside of those borders. One of those are the hills up here of Gush Etzion. The settlements, the four of them that were up there, of Masor Yitzchak, of Ein Surim, of Kibbutz Revadim, and of course the most famous one of Kibbutz Kfar Etzion, were all now left outside the map of Israel, having to fend for themselves. getting any types of arms, getting any types of ammunition, medical supplies, food, whatever else needed to become to get to Gush Etzion was now a huge, huge obstacle for the Haganah and for the Palmach and everyone else who was involved. We know that he had a Weitzman who flew his plane into Gush Etzion, landed and dropped off supplies a couple of times. But that didn't happen frequently enough. And so those people up there on the Gush were now cut off. January 1948, the Haganah realizes that they have to get supplies very quickly up there. They've tried already from convoys, and unfortunately those convoys have been blasted off the road. And so now they decided the next thing to do was to send a group walking from the area of Bet Shemesh, which is this way, all the way towards Gush Etzion. You know, when you stand here at the place that we're at, outside of a kibbutz that was built in 1949, named Kibbutz Lamed Hey, the 35, every single kid in Israel knows the story of the Lamed Hey, the 35. But they weren't 35 who left Bet Shemesh. They weren't 35 who gathered in the area just beyond Bet Shemesh. Any of you that are familiar with the cemetery of Eretz HaChaim, we know it sits just underneath the moshav known today as Nacham or Har Tuv as then. It's also the place, by the way, that the Ma'abarot, when the immigrants came to Israel after 1950 and they settled in the area of Bet Shemesh, it's the place that they settled in that area over there. Har Tuv was a small little moshav, agricultural colony, cut off as well from so many other places. Bet Shemesh didn't exist at the time, a place today that has 140 to 150,000 people. Bet Shemesh, all it was known for was a British police station, which, like so many other places, come 1948, when the British will leave, will be given over to the Arabs. The Jews knew that in order to be able to get to Gush Etzion from their base in Har Tuv, they had to bypass the area of the British station in order that the British wouldn't track them. The man who led this whole mission was a very famous guy, a young commander, but up and coming, well known in the Palmach, in the Plugat Machatz, the strike force of the Haganah. His name was Dani Mas from Yerushalayim. Dani Mas had in his hands 38 people who he was going to take to Gush Etzion, packs on their backs. But you should know they had a lot of ammunition there as well, in Har Tuv, ready to take it up as well. Except they were unable to carry everything. And they didn't take everything there and then. They left very late. And the people who were with Danny told him maybe we should wait till the next day. He said, no, we can't wait for the people of Gush Etzion. And they left at 11 p.m. on the 15th of January. They had to bypass the area of Bet Shemesh, coming through this area that we're now in. And that's why Kibbutz Lamed Hey is named after the people who were here. And they headed up to where a place called Nachal Sansan, which is in this direction over here. We're going to be heading there to carry on the story. But before we do that, when you look over here at this monument, which speaks about the story, because at the end of the day, unfortunately, as everybody knows in Israel, the Lamed Hey didn't make it. On here you can see the name of Daniel Mas over here, and you'll see, like many other people, I know some of them, like their families. One of them is Tuvia Kushner, Tuvia, whose parents named him after a beautiful flower that used to grow here in Israel. These flowers, unfortunately, were plucked and they were murdered here, just beyond those hills over there. We're going to be heading up there now to carry on the story.
Let's go to the second part of that story now, and I'll open up the next part.
The story of Gush Etzion and the story of the Lamed Hey, the 35s, doesn't exactly start behind us, even though this is the area they came through. They came from Har Tuv, around Bet Shemesh, through the area here to lead us into a valley that we'll see in a second called Nachal Sansan. But we have to go back 2 days. And when we do go back, we understand that the Mufti of Jerusalem had ordered an attack onto the residents of Gush Etzion, particularly trying to take out two of the Yeshuvim, two of the communities, one Kfar Etzion and another one called Revadim. Revadim happened to be, by the way, part of the non-religious kibbutz movement. There was a call in Hebrew University. 40 people answered that call. And they were about to leave from Hebrew University. They headed towards Ein Kerem of Jerusalem to then continue down to Beit Shemesh when they heard shooting. So they decided to turn around and head the next day. On the 14th, they headed down there and they reached the area of Har Tov. 40 of them. 38 of them will now leave on the 15th of January to come to here. So why is the story known as the 35 if 38 left? One of the guys sprained his ankle not far from where we're standing now, and two of them took him back towards the area of Har Tov. So we've now lost 3 and we're down now to 35. They head into this riverbed over here. And the riverbed itself, which we can't really make out, but it sits just beyond the grove of trees that you can see over here, is called Nachal Sansan. Beyond the fence, you get to see the grove of trees, the Nachal, and then you notice there's an Arab village here. They left way too late, 11 o'clock. They arrive here because they're trying to cover 22 kilometers by dawn, but they don't manage to. Because of the problems they had of the one person who sprained his ankle, because of the problems that they left too late, they arrive here and dawn starts. Over here, they meet an Arab shepherd. Danny Mass has been given orders to make sure that he's not revealed. But he says, no, Arab shepherd. At least this is what we understand, because not everything do we know. And this old Arab shepherd, they left him alive. The Arab shepherd, thinking that the Jews were coming to attack his town, produced something which is known as the fazcha, which is a whistle. He whistled, and he goes from one hill to the next. And if you look now and the camera pans, you can see there's different Arab villages in different places. They come streaming down the hills, understanding there's been a call to attack. Danny Mas realizes with his people that he's not going to make it to Gush Etzion because the Arabs are now coming down. And he heads, for some reason, to a hillside that we're about to see now. He comes out of the riverbed, the Nachal, crosses over today what's a main road, and he heads up to a hillside, which is now in front of us over here. If you notice this hillside now, you can see there's a path going all the way up, because every single year in January, thousands of youth come here and they hike the path of the Lamed Hay, of the 35. Danny Mas heads up here, and there's a battle that takes place around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They're all killed. That's about as much as we know. Until later on, after the bodies are taken to Gush Etzion, to Kibbutz Kfar Etzion, the British request that the women leave the area of the dining room and they bring in the bodies. The kibbutznikim are absolutely devastated when they see what's happened here, because the bodies have been mutilated. What took place? So we now know because of Hamish Dugan. Hamish Dugan was in charge of the Scottish Guard, and he was based in Hebron. Remember, the British are in control here. He sees and hears ambulances streaming to the hospital of Hebron. Doesn't understand what's going on here. He tries to work out what's happening and nobody will tell him. So he follows the ambulances back to the village of Surif. He meets there the Mukhtar, the head of the village. Tries to get information from him. Doesn't get any information until finally he tells him this: Allah is happy with what you have done. Please tell me where I should go. The Mukhtar, hearing that concept that Allah is happy with the fact that he's fought and his brave soldiers, 100 of them who had died here, against the 35, tells him where they are. They're up on the hillside. Hamish Dugan goes up to the hillside to see the bodies of the 35 in a circle with their legs in, their bodies out, protecting the top of the hill. All of them dead, many of them with stones in their hands because they'd run out of ammunition and they were throwing stones down at the Arab attackers that were coming up. McDougan goes back to the village of Surif in order to be able to get some trucks, the British trucks that had come with him, to come back to this place over here to gather up the bodies. As he gets close to the village, he hears war cries, doesn't understand what's going on. He gets in there, he finds that he's got 2 British soldiers, his own soldiers, who are about to be murdered in the village. The villagers think they're Jews who have come to avenge the death of the 35 that's taken place here. But there were 2 British soldiers who unfortunately were a little bit too drunk, and they've been taken. He manages to release them, and he gets those trucks. As he's driving back, because of what has taken place in Surif, that they think that somebody has come to avenge the death, some of the Arabs had come back to the hillside and chopped up the bodies. McDougan does tell us that he found 81 letters that were written by the Lamed Hay before they died. Probably some of those letters were written before they left Bet Shemesh that were in their pockets, and others that were written very hastily just before they died. We have no remnants of those letters any longer. When he arrives here, finds the bodies, he can't believe what he sees. A head here, an arm here, legs here. Piles it all together, and now you understand why when he went to Kfar Etzion, he asked for people to leave the dining hall as he brought the bodies in. The bodies are buried there in Gush Etzion. They didn't make it alive to their mission, but they made it, unfortunately, to their burial place in Gush Etzion. The story doesn't end there, of course, because today, if you go to Har Herzl in Yom HaZikaron, at least until 2 years ago when they finished the memorial hall, every year the main ceremony took place at 11 o'clock in the morning with the siren next to the residents of Gush Etzion and the fighters of the Lamed Hay. The Prime Minister would stand there, he would speak, the siren would go off, always next to Gush Etzion. They say there was no funeral in Jerusalem like the funeral of the 35. And that was partly to do with another story that takes place. After they managed to exhume the bodies, after an agreement is made by Israel and Jordan, because it falls under the hands of Jordan after 1948, and we can't come here for 19 years, Rav Goren exhumes the bodies and takes them to Jerusalem, but they don't know what to do with them. What are they going to do with all these bodies? And they bring in, of course, the tzaddik in our time, Rabbi Aryeh Levine. Rabbi Aryeh Levine is brought in and does some type of Kabbalistic idea called the Goral, which I'm not familiar with, flipping the Tanakh back one way to the other to piece together the bodies. He pieces together 34 of them. The 35th, he knew who it was. And then they're buried here in Jerusalem. 35 is a story that we're left with, a legacy of people who were extremely brave, who tried to make the 22-kilometer hike in order to try and help four of the communities in Gush Etzion. They were unsuccessful, but some of our youngest, unfortunately, were plucked at such a tender age while they were in university. All of them were reservists in the army. None of them were actual soldiers at the time. Some of them left behind families, others left behind a whole life that they never, unfortunately, were able to lead. The 35.
So the story of the 35, as you saw, is well known. You might not have been familiar with it, and certainly sometimes people are familiar with the story of 35 people that were killed, but are not familiar with the story of Hamish McDougan. Literally because of this man, and he went back to Kfar Etzion after 1967 to tell the story, we're able today to pass that story on. You might have noticed where I was standing, there was a pillbox. Okay, there was like this tower to my left. And you would have also noticed, I said, beyond the fence, you can see the Arab village. That's a security fence today. which splits up between Israel and the Palestinian territories, which were on the other side there. So I live in Mount Bet Shemesh. It's literally a 5-minute drive to the security fence from where I am. The security fence itself is cameraed, and in order to make sure that nobody comes anywhere near the fence. And there's also an area, and you might have noticed that as well, which is combed every day to check for footprints to make sure that terrorism doesn't come in. It's done its work, but it doesn't do its work by itself. The security fence works because of the fact that the Israeli army is still in the areas of Judea and Samaria, Yehuda v'Shamron, and they're still doing things. I'm sure that you will all keep up with the news, and you know of a drive-by shooting that took place here 2 days ago, where one of the people were laid to rest tonight. Okay, 1,500 people were at his funeral this evening. A 19-year-old boy, unfortunately, who was shot by a Palestinian terrorist, and they caught the terrorist. They managed to catch him. Part of the reality, unfortunately, of what we're still dealing with here. Are there any questions up to now before we move on to the next video?
Anyone got any questions for Tzvi, or should we move on?
Nope, are we good?
Weiter.
Okay, we're going to the next video. Sorry. Okay, this is now, we're going to deal with where these people lived and the final battles that took place there.
So we've come up onto this hillside over here, and you've just seen Yerushalayim this way, Hebron this way, how Gush Etzion sits bang in the middle. And this was the place which from 1923 Jews came back to. First settlement is set up here by a group of Yemenite Jews. They're called Migdal Eder. They actually set up down by where you see there's a yellow sign that says Supersol. That's the area where their first settlement is. Migdal Eder have to leave very quickly because of the Arab riots in 1929, which take place all the way across the view, killing lots of Jews, unfortunately, including the Jews that are killed in 1929, over 60 of them in Hebron. The next attempt to settle the hills where we are right now is a group of Jews who come up here after the land is bought here by a man called Holtzman in 1939. Holtzman, by the way, in German is the translation of citrus trees. And that's where you get the name Etzion, Etzion, okay, the tree of Zion, okay, which is being planted here. And they're successful, but unfortunately, in 1936, again, there's a set of riots, and the Jews leave very quickly. Many Jews are killed across the whole view that you have seen. Finally, though, in 1945, we have another group of Jews that arrive. And I'm going to just turn around now so that the camera can see the area of the Gush, which I'm walking around now, this structure which is up here, which is going to come into a story in a second. So this is the area beyond us of the hills of Kfar Etzion, which are over here. And Kfar Etzion is going to be the first yeshuv, the first community that's settled here. A kibbutz, where Jews are going to come to, and they're going to settle this area over here. The next set of Jews that are going to arrive here, of course, are going to be people who come out of the Shoah, people who have come from the Holocaust. 1945, of course, is the end of the war, and in 1946, Jews already arriving to the land of Israel, even though in 45 we get a few of them, by the way. But in 46, the next group are going to come, but in 47, they're going to be able to settle the land. One of those places are going to be children from Buchenwald. We know very personally one of their people, his name is Dov Landau, who will come up here and settle the area of Masor Yitzchak. Both Kfar Etzion, Masor Yitzchak, and Ein Surim, the third one, are all under the Bnei Akiva movement that will come and settle this area. And then we'll get to the fourth one, another community that will come here to join them. A group called, that will set up a kibbutz called Revadim. They come from the Shomer HaTzair movement. That's the left of center of the religious spectre and of the political spectre of Israel. But again, it tells you something about Gush Etzion, the Etzion block, how it's in the consensus of Israel until today. Now, we're standing, though, in part of the end of the story. Because as we said, we've now got 4 flourishing communities that are here in 1947. But remember, the 29th of November, 1947 will leave the area of Gush Etzion out of the Jewish state. And they are now here to defend for themselves. The place that we're standing in, and I'm going to walk back around now, is the area known as the Russian monastery. There's a part over here that you can see, the cement area over here, and this structure that's meant to be like the abscess of where the church once stood. There's also ruins that we have over here, and we have a number of water cisterns that are around here as well. Why is this used? So this place is the outer defense for Gush Etzion against the marauding Arabs that came from this way to be able to attack them. And they did that time and again. In January, we know of a number of convoys that didn't make it. We know of convoys that got here and then were attacked on the way back. We know of the 35, of course, that lost their lives on the way to Gush Etzion. And they made the decision that they were going to then move some of the women and children. It was one of the worst nights in Kfar Etzion. Votes whether yes or no to move the children. And most women and children were very, very skeptical about leaving their parents. We're talking about a community now that had 167 people, adults here, and 50 kids that were born here. In fact, I grew up in England with one of the kids who was the first kid to be reborn in the new Kfar Etzion.
What?
He was the Shalom of Bnei Akiva.
Yes.
But his father fell here in Gush Etzion in 1948. His father was one of the original fighters and could have stood here originally where we are now. A man called Shir Altman, who was here. Finally, the decision was taken to move some of those women and children. But you should know now, when you deal with the story of the battles that took place of Gush Etzion, incredibly, this has the most amount of women that stay to fight. Some of them just send their kids, and the husband and wife stay here, defending what they have built here. Defending, as you can see around you over here, which have been replanted, but they planted these originally as well. Grapevines, beautiful trees. They've got cherry trees here, orchards here. They want to defend what they've managed to build. In May 1948 comes the first major blow. As Kfar Etzion loses this area that we're standing in right now, the Russian monastery. 13 of its soldiers, it's the first time that such a huge amount of people are going to be killed here by the Arabs that have arrived here. And they gain strength, these people, knowing that if they've managed to capture the outer border of the kibbutz, the actual place where they put most of their defenses on, they can get into the kibbutz, and it took them only 1 day to get into the kibbutz. Masor Yitzchak, Ein Surim, Revadim will surrender, knowing that they can't fight, but Kfar Etzion will continue the fight, and at the end they will gather everybody by another part within Kfar Etzion. And unfortunately, those that had been killed during the battle were left outside. Those that were gathered in the area which was hailing the wounded, known as the bunker, inside a building that sits today inside the kibbutz, were blown up by a grenade. And then they brought everybody else outside that building in order to be able to take a photo. Most of them were shot dead instead of a photo that had taken place. We know of 4 survivors of the original battle of Kfar Etzion. Throughout the 4 settlements that stood here, 360 of them went off, and they were taken prisoners, and they were sent off to Jordan. And they were there for 9 months until there was a prisoner exchange to be able to bring them back. And that is also when they were able to take the bodies out of this area of Kfar Etzion. Those are the people who had fallen. Those are the people of Lamed Hey who were taken, of course, and were reburied in Jerusalem. Ben Gurion turns up to Tel Aviv on the 14th of May, 1948. He goes to a building that was, of course, Mayor Dizengoff, who was the mayor of Tel Aviv's building, who turned it into an art museum. It was the building on Rothschild's Boulevard, which, of course, will become extremely famous because that will be the place of Hachrazat HaMedina, the establishment of the state, the declaration of the state of Israel. It will happen on Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The British will leave at midnight. But we declare independence 8 hours before because of Shabbat. And then Ben Gurion will make his famous statements. Because as he has declared the state of Israel, and people are rejoicing over the fact that we now have a state of our own, he then says this: the bonfires which are being burnt in, which are lit in the hills of Hebron, are those of the settlements of Kfar Etzion, of Avadim, of Masor Yitzchak and Ein Surim. They are the Shabbat candles. That should be for us a message. The message is that I know no battle like the Battle of Gush Etzion. I know no great warriors like those that tried to protect Jerusalem from the south and stood here for 47 days and fought tooth and nail day and night in order to hold on to the gates of Jerusalem, to be able to protect the people of Yerushalayim. And that is why, in its code name, and the last message that came from Kfar Etzion was as follows: Hamalka Nafla, the Queen has fallen. The Queen. Maybe connecting us as well to that beautiful idea of Boi Chala, the Shabbat Queen, which was the bonfires of these places which were burning throughout the night.
Gush Etzion will carry on, the people of Gush Etzion will be taken up to prison. They won't be able to stay in the area of Gush Etzion. They'll be taken, they'll go to Jordan and onwards to other places. It will only come back after 1967. And in 1967, you're going to find then the first part of a new story. I want to just introduce you, because some of you also know this person, to where this story takes place. So I'm going to share one or two small more videos with you that are going to allow you to get this understanding as well. So let me just share this video with you. Excuse me. Of Yeshivat Har Etzion.
Towards the end of June in 1970, a man comes up to this hillside with a group of people. 13 guys leave a very famous yeshiva in Jerusalem, and they head up to this hillside over here to build what we see behind us today. Now, I'm not sure whether there's another place that in England has so many Jewish educators that have come out of, that have walked through the halls here, that have sat in the Bet Midrash here, that have listened to the rabbis who teach here, more than this building over here, which has produced them, which is, of course, Yeshivat Har Etzion. Even the previous rabbi of yours, Rabbi Rosler, spent many years here, sitting at the back of the Beit Midrash, learning every single day. And I won't forget, he would learn the daf, the page of Talmud, off by heart every day and be tested. Incredible. Okay, that was to the people that have been here. But what's the story behind this place? So again, they are pretty much at the very beginning of the Jews returning to Gush Etzion. In 1970, that's 3 years after the Six-Day War, they finally come up here. And they come up here with a man called Rav Amital, a thinker, a great leader of the religious Zionist world, an incredible person who unfortunately has passed on now, but leaves his legacy for us till this very day. We read his books, we listen to his writings. Rav Amital said as follows: Jewish suffering is not what makes the Jewish people great, but the fact that we build mankind and bring godliness into this world, that's what makes the Jewish people great. He was once quoted speaking about his beard that had turned white. And he said, what do you want? A man who has seen the death and the rebirth of the Jewish people. How could that not make your beard turn white? A man who had gone from his home to see Jews being killed in Auschwitz, to stand and watch people dancing on the establishment of the state. A man who watched his soldiers go off and fight in the Suez Canal in the Six-Day War in 73, because he was an educator before that, before he came to Etzion. All these things were connected to this great man who built this vision for us today. He knew that he could touch on a certain amount of people, but he understood as well this concept of bringing other people to be able to reach the eventual goal. And that is why he then invites another famous rabbi, Rabbi Lichtenstein, who was the son-in-law of Rabbi Soloveitchik from Yeshiva University, to come and build the full package here. This yeshiva, without a doubt, is left for us as one of the greatest bastions of religious Zionism, one of the greatest places where people have taught. And to this very day, the messages that come out from the buildings behind us ring true to so many of us who live in the land of Israel. Yehi zichron baruch to Rav Amital and to Rav Lichtenstein, leaders that we so dearly, dearly miss. Not just their teachings that they wrote, but just the Messiah scale, being able to watch the way they live their lives. Absolutely beautiful people who are so badly missed.
The story of the Gush also, unfortunately, has a bitter other part to it, which is very famous to many of you, and this stands here in the Gush.
Littered with monuments that are connected to either people who fell during wars, battles that happened, and of course terrorist attacks that took place. Probably one of the more famous ones is this one over here, of Gilad, Eyal and Naphtali, the three boys, who lo and behold, we probably all remember, but don't remember how far long ago it was. It was 7 years ago. In June of 2014, these three boys were hitchhiking back home after their long week. Some of them were studying in Kibbutz Kfar Etzion, and they were traveling on the back roads towards Bet Shemesh, heading towards their homes. They were picked up, put in the car, and only later did they realize the mistake. They got in a car which, unfortunately, just like before, many years before that, where the Palestinians had taken up this idea of dressing up as Jews, the same problem had taken place here with these three boys. By the time they were in the car, it was possibly too late. One of them managed to make a phone call to the police, who didn't know whether or not it was a proper phone call or a hoax. And it was left on the side, and possibly, had we managed to realize that at that particular moment, who knows whether history will be able to tell us a different story. But for days, we will now search for the car and for the three boys. Unification of this country comes under the most extreme circumstances. And this was one of them, where everybody was unified behind finding the three boys, not just in Israel, across the world. Demonstrations, requests at the UN, under what was known as Mifsah Shuvu Achim, with Shuvu Banim, the operation to return our boys home. The Israeli army came out in force. Some of the top elite units came out, searching all over the hills from anywhere around here. But then they realized they need extra help. And they called in from Nechusha, which is close to Bet Shemesh, some of the tour guides who live in that area over there. One of them in particular, who's going to remain nameless, is very famous within the tour guide community as a man who goes barefoot everywhere, but knows every jabal, every hill, every bore, every water cistern, every nook and cranny of the valleys of Yehuda v'Sharon. He came in, working with what he knew. He said, I'm telling you, this is where they've probably taken him to. On his first day of searching, they found the car, and they found the burnt bodies, and unfortunately they found the remnants of our boys, who were then buried all together in the Modi'in cemetery. This happened in June, and then moves in the second part of trying to now find the captors. Within 2 months, by August of 2014, we had found them. Two of the people from the Hamas movement who had kidnapped these boys and murdered them here. You know, Gush Etzion has seen its fair share, unfortunately, of terrorism. fair share of terrible times during the Intifada, during the uprising of the Arabs. And this last maybe fatality is another very famous person within these areas, and I'm sure in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, maybe you heard of him. It's a man called Ari Fuld, whose brother today is a high-tech guru, but Ari himself was an advocate for Israel, worked heavily in Hasbara, in advocacy for us. And on the day that he was murdered, he was stabbed and shot, and he still managed to kill his attacker, but will die at the junction over here called the Summit Gush. When you walk through Gush Etzion, you remember the price we paid in 1948. You remember the price we've paid to live here happily since those days. But we also remember something back from the time of the Talmud, where it speaks about the idea of Eretz Yisrael Niknei Al Yidei Yisurim. The land of Israel is sometimes acquired as well through hardship. Remember that concept that we say when we bench. We say the famous words of Shir HaMalot B'Shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion Hayinu Kachomim. We talk about the idea of the fact that we plant everything with tears, we sow. We have to work very hard to be able to get it. We might even, unfortunately, not be able always to reap what we are dreamed for. But at the end of the day, that dream will become a reality. Those people who stood in various places in Gush Etzion in 1948, who unfortunately lost their lives here, their families stood in Yerushalayim and watched towards this area. But they returned home. Just like Rav Amital also mentioned, we have returned home to the people and to the place that gave us so much history. The story of the three boys here at the junction of Alon Shvut.
There is a lot more to be able to tell about Gush Etzion. I mean, Gush Etzion as well, by the way, for those people who want to come for the more exciting parts in Gush Etzion. There, of course, is the winery. There's a new place which is making cheeses, new places making unbelievable mushrooms, and all sorts of other things that are taking place there. And of course, archaeology. Herod's summer palace is in Gush Etzion, a place called Herodian, which the only way I can describe it, and where he dies, by the way, where he's buried, not where he dies in Jericho, but he's buried in Herodian. And we found his grave today, which is an incredible, even if you went to Herodian few years ago, you won't recognize the site today. But the one thing I will say about it is the only way to describe it is if you remember the James Bond film, and one of them had Jaws, I think that guy who had the funny teeth, and they built this man-made hill, and inside they had the compound. It's exactly the same thing that Herod managed to do, but 2,000 years beforehand. He built a man-made hill and built his palace inside the hill, all in order to be able to protect him from the heat. There is an incredible amount to do 20 minutes away from Jerusalem. And hopefully next time you come to Israel, you'll be able to see Gush Etzion and be able to now have a little bit more understanding of the price that we paid in order to be able to have the Gush, and the price today, unfortunately, of the more recent unfortunate instances that have taken place in that area too. I'm going to open it up for questions because I know it's late and it's later than we expected, but I'm sorry about the technical details. But let's, if there are any questions, any comments, please.
I'm sure some people are going to want to ask one or two questions. I've got a very political question to ask. I'm not sure that I should ask it, but it's more, we all want peace in Israel. We all want peace in the Middle East. It's something that we pray for it, we hope for it. What that peace looks like, again, this is probably one of the reasons we can't have an actual government in Israel, because it's so diverse. But practically, the only realistic peace is giving up of land, and a pshara, a compromise on both sides. Can you see in Israel where the Gush will be split, or the area, not maybe the Gush, but the area around the Gush will be split, that will see scenes like they were when we left Gaza? Can you see that practically happening in Israel to allow peace?
Okay, so look,
you might not want to deal with this tonight, and it was just something.
I'm happy. I'm happy to
thinking.
answer.
Just, yeah,
it's a little harder down the map, but if you look at Gush Etzion, as I said, is spread out. It's quite spread out, and there's another part of Gush Etzion which is further southeast, which is called Malei Amos and other places like that. Malei Amos, Malei Cheva, other places like that. Do I believe that those places would be held on if there was a consensus that we hold on to Gush Etzion, but we give up other land? That would be a part that the Israelis would sort of say, you know what, you can have that area over there. Okay, that's your part of Gush Etzion. Do I think that Israel in general will say, and I'm not talking about Meretz, the far left, I'm talking about Yair Lapid, okay, Gidon Sa'ar, these people who are going to be running the government, they don't ever want to give up on the areas of where you saw the yeshiva, where the 3 boys were killed, where the Gush Etzion is. They all want to hold on to that. It's a very important part from our history, and also from the perspective of even strategically, to be able to make sure the road is still held on to. Israel, will it make heavy decisions that unfortunately might cause the idea that certain people may not be in their places they're living at the moment? The answer is probably yes. Okay. I'm not saying whether I agree with it or disagree with it, but probably they may have to do that. Now, again, you would hope that there would be 2 to tango with, but there isn't, and that's the biggest problem. Even now, look at the news. The Palestinians cancelled their elections. Okay, now they've cancelled their elections for the last 15 years. Same person still in power. Okay, they keep cancelling their elections, and the people they blame it on are Israel.
Didn't they say they cancelled it because of Meron?
They said they can't. Yeah, that's right. Okay, they said they cancelled it because of Jerusalem and other things, that we wouldn't let them vote in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is an international city. It's not a Palestinian city. Unless somebody has missed something here, that's what it is. Okay, it's a capital of Israel, and it's not a Palestinian city. Abu Dis is an area that is connected to them, which is just east of Jerusalem. There's no one there to speak to at the present moment, and you know what? I'm not going to say that Biden won't do anything while he's in power. He'll try, but he'll come across the same obstacle unless the Palestinians also start to come to the table with a different thing. You want to make a deal, you got to have somebody to speak to. It can't just be grab. It's got to be a partnership here.
Avanti, sorry, I don't want to over politicize the thing. It's very sensitive, and if we had all the answers, then there would be world peace, huh?
That's it. Yeah. What I will say, sorry, is very important though, and I see that Lynn has got her hand up. Sure. What I will say is this: the concept of this idea of the lion lying down with the sheep, okay, that idea that we speak about in Isaiah with the Israelis and the Palestinians, that's not peace. You have to remember what this is. This concept of peace, if the world stopped looking at it that way, but understood that we're going into a business agreement, we get there much quicker. It's a business agreement, this. Okay, it's like doing a deal over companies. That's exactly what needs to be done here, properly, okay, and hopefully maturely, which is also a big problem in Israel. Thank you. Okay. Lynn had a question I saw. Sorry.
Lynn, please unmute. Feel free to ask a question.
Hello, Tzvi, thank you so much for, again, amazing talk and presentation. Some things that I didn't know about, and I feel ashamed that I didn't know about these things. Very moving indeed. You mentioned many times Masrat Yitzchak. Now, I had family that moved, my cousin and her family moved in the 60s to a Moshav Masrat Yitzchak. Yeah. And I visited it many times near Ashkelon. Is that the same one? That is it?
That's the same one.
I couldn't believe it when you were mentioning this place. Yeah. My gosh.
Vadim, Masrat Yitzchak, and Ein Surim, the 3 of the 4, the other one was Kfar Etzion, 3 of the 4 moved straight afterwards, whenever they could, they got straight down to the area of the south. So Masrat Yitzchak and Ein Surim are opposite each other. But Vadim is a little further south, but the 3 of them resettled in the south. Kfar Etzion held out, and they held out till 1967. The people lived in like what we call an ir butz, which means a city kibbutz in Jerusalem. They would stand in a place, if you've been to Jerusalem, it was one of the videos that we're going to show, but we run out of time, in a place called Yad Kennedy. Okay, Yad Kennedy is the highest area that we have that was overlooking Jerusalem, a place near a place called Moshav Ora, on the way down to Hadassah in Ein Kaim. They would stand there and they would look towards Gush Etzion, and they would see a tree that was standing alone. Everything else had been destroyed, but the tree they could still see. It's called the Alon HaBoded, the lonely tree. And that's why, by the way, where you saw the yeshiva built is called Alon Shvut. They've returned to the oak tree, because this was the Alon HaBoded, the oak tree that stood all alone. And they would stand there for 19 years looking towards their home. 20 years after they'd been kicked out, they finally made it, and they started to build Kfar Etzion.
So where are they standing? They're standing above Ein Kerem, like that.
Above Ein Kerem,
like by Vagan, that kind of.
No. Ein Kerem, you come straight up the hill from Hadassah Ein Kerem. The first junction is to a place called Moshav Ora. You follow the road through, you get to a monument to Kennedy. Okay, to JFK, and right there they stood and they looked towards Gush Etzion from there.
Lots of weddings.
Okay, it's the same one.
Yeah, I think they went to Masha. I think it was. I think their oldest son David was Dovido, we used to call him. Was about. I think it was pre-bar mitzvah when they went there, and they had a lot of children. And one of their sons, Benjamin. I went to his wedding. Unfortunately, it didn't last. But he was in the tank corps, and I remember he lost an eye. And a lovely family. It's a religious moshav.
Yeah, it's a very successful place today.
Yeah.
One of the things that I just wanted, before I take another question, if anyone ever wants to read the story, if anyone wants to read the story of the how Rabbi Aryeh Levine managed to sort out the whole issue of the 35. It's in his book, which is an incredible book written by a man called Simcha Raz. I'm sure the Rabbi will attest to that. He's probably read it.
I've got it.
Okay. It's called The Tzaddik in Our Time, and it's an incredible story. It's there in the middle of the book. Okay. There was a comment in the chat just now about Rabbi Rosler, I saw.
They went to Alon Shvut in 2001 on a solidarity mission.
Okay. So Rabbi Rosler and myself grew up together in Kenton. He used to, as a kid, I'll never forget, on Simchat Torah night, we would go to his house on the night of Simchat Torah, and he would make us sit down and we would go through every parasha in the Torah and give a Dvar Torah. That's what Simchat Torah was for. I always loved that love of Torah. As you know him so well in England and you knew him in the community, he was a quite a well-known face at the back of Alon Shvut, in the back of the yeshiva in those days as well.
Anyone got any questions for Tzvi? Anyone? Speak now, forever hold your peace. You covered quite a lot, through a lot of information at us, which is amazing. Would you suggest driving these? People go to Israel.
Yeah, okay. You're asking a good question. Do I suggest driving to Gush Etzion? The answer is yes. There's absolutely no problem whatsoever to drive to Gush Etzion. If you were going to go beyond Gush Etzion to Hebron, you need to know where you're going. Okay, but to Gush Etzion, no problem. I mean, the biggest problem to Gush Etzion today is traffic. Okay, there are so many people living in the Gush today that the road is now being extended and widened. They're building another new tunnel there to allow people to get there. But you have no problem in driving to Gush Etzion. Thank God, since the beginning of the last Intifada, there really hasn't been any trouble on the roads. And God willing, that will continue. I mean, again, are you asking if there's ever any trouble there? So you probably saw a video, I don't know whether it made it to the English news this week. There was the unfortunate drive-by that took place that I told you about. In Gush Etzion, there was a woman, I'm not sure whether it came to the news, but there was a woman who came up to 3 soldiers with a knife. Okay, and the soldiers were trying to tell her to stop. They didn't shoot her, they managed to take the knife out of her. She was being beaten at home by her husband. And so she came to do a suicide attack on the soldiers just to get herself out of the terrible state, the domestic state that she was having at home, which the soldiers in Israel are now helping her. But that was the case. And people, unfortunately, we all know of cases like that, where people that are, chaser onim, how do you say that in English? they're unable to find any other exit, and
helpless.
they'll do the, yeah. So it's very safe there in the Gush. You'll see plenty of people walk around. They go jeeping there, they go riding there, they hike there. I mean, now it's summertime here. People will be swimming in the springs as well in the Gush. So it's not.
I would suggest to anyone that it's probably too soon to talk about the next few months, but
It's not too soon. Now's the time to plan. Come home. Let's see you. Come on.
We're coming.
Back. I know that people are desperate to come. All right. Now's the time.
For sure. So when you go back to Israel, maybe the first time you got to see your friends and family you haven't seen, but the second time you go back and you're going to do all the touring. So as I've said before in the previous 3 events we've done with Tzvi and JRoots, you know, I'm not going to just plug JRoots here. I'm saying when you go around Israel with anyone that knows, right? We've got Tzvi here, and he works with many educators and tour guides and teachers way beyond what JRoots does. But I'm just saying you've got a good conduit here if you want to speak to someone like Tzvi who can take you. But Bichlal, anyone that knows what they're doing, where they are, will take you down roads, towns, streets, show you things that you just have, like, including myself. And I lived in Yerushalayim for 7 years, nearly 7 years, and I probably, like most of us who live in London, don't have a clue about London history, so I probably miss so many things. When you go with someone that knows, and if you have a few precious days and you want to spare some time and go with someone that knows, even my brother's father-in-law who teaches in Haifa University, he knows like so much about history, he's taught us so much, whatever it is. Take the time, go with someone that knows, go to a place you've never been, explore this most beautiful, historic and inspiring land, and let's keep our connection even in the diaspora. We can keep our connection. So Tzvi, thank you for bringing this to us. And if anyone does want, I can put you in touch with JRoots if you need any help, guidance with that. And I am going to work with Tzvi, please God, to organize another Poland trip. We're going to make up the one we had 44.
And maybe one too as well.
Huh?
And maybe one too as well, bye-bye.
I was thinking that actually as you were talking, we should do one of these to Israel. But
yeah, absolutely.
If there's interest in either one, I'm thinking for sometime maybe in the spring next year, at the end of the winter, spring, to do to Poland for a few days. So we had 45 people booked on the last trip. We had to cancel. So there's definitely a need for that, and Israel for sure. Thank you very much. If you want to have, we haven't. Can got I just
add one thing, Rabbi?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I mean, you know what? It's all Beshet that things got moved from time to time. But remember that this Sunday night is Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, and that's very much connected to the story of Gush Etzion. Gush Etzion was placed there only to protect Yerushalayim. Okay, and we're also at that time of the English Gregorian calendar where Gush Etzion fell. So it actually fitted very nicely that we were able to speak about it this evening. And I want to thank Belmont the Swans for sponsoring this evening, and Rabbi Levine for being a great supporter always, and my mum, okay, and my auntie, and everybody else. Thank you very, very much to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Tzvi. Really appreciate it. And that's the last one we've got in the diary with JRoots. If there's a place you'd like to visit in Israel and you want Tzvi to take us around, please do get in touch. Feel free to sponsor, and we look forward to virtually seeing places that we never thought we'd see. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening, and thank you once again, Tzvi. It's very late there. Go to bed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tzvi.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Tzvi.
Thank you. Good night, Rabbi. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. God
Bye.
bless. Take care.
Yeah.